Hello and welcome back to Automotive Tales. On today's episode, I want to talk about a particular brand that's very close to my heart and a very specific model, the Volvo 850. So hopefully by now you've seen a video on another channel called The Late Break Show with Jonny Smith, or the Car Pervert, or the Smith of Smith and Sniff, depending on your preference. So Jonny came to have a look at a car I had sat on my driveway. It has appeared on the channel before as I've moved it from pillar to post, and that is my very own yellow Volvo 850 T-5R, to be very specific. So I thought I'd do this quick follow-up video because I'm sort of hoping people will come to the channel and want to know more about the car. And because it hasn't featured a huge amount on the channel, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my history with Volvo, specifically the Volvo 850, and a little bit about the history of this very specific Volvo 850 T-5R. So, not sure if you can hear me over the wind and over the compressor that is running here, but we're going to ice blast under the bonnet of the Volvo 850. There's a lot more going on besides that, but I can't really talk about that till it comes out on another channel. But yeah, let's go and see what ice blasting looks like. So join me as I give you my own tall tales on my life with Volvo 850s and why it doesn't appear on the channel as much as maybe it should do. So let's get started and roll all the way back to when I was just a wee boy. So as with all good car stories, they tend to start either when you're a child or something related to your parents, and this is no exception. So in 1994, at the tender age of 10, yes, that means I have just turned 40, or I certainly will have done by the time this video goes out, my father had a Volvo 740, and he then decided to upgrade to the all fandangled new fancy model coming out of Volvo, which was the Volvo 850. The all things to all men type family dad car. And it really was, because what my dad bought wasn't any old 850. He bought a red Volvo 850 Estate, and it was a T5. Those that are familiar with the Volvo range will know that that means it's equipped with the 2.3 litre 5-cylinder transverse engine up front, sadly driving the front wheels, not the rear wheels like the older 740s and the 240s he had before that. But following on in his dad wagon trend, this was the new car in the stable, and wow, was it cool. 10-year-old me was obsessed with the noise of the turbo, the way it would accelerate, and how it was just so different to every Volvo he'd previously had. And that evolved into a bit of a fascination. So my dad took me to see some racing. We went to Donington Park, which ironically was a long journey back then. I now live really not that far away from Donington Park. And we went to see something called the British Touring Car Championship, which is where this comes into the picture. So you may have seen this in the video with Jonny Smith. This is my absolutely beloved model of a Volvo 850 Estate touring car. Specifically number 14, this is the Jan Lammers car, in all the Securicore livery. Those that have followed British Touring Car or are familiar with the history will know this car and this livery very, very well. I have a cat.
A few moments later.
Right, cat extracted from the desk, sort of. So, the reason this is very important is that very meeting at Donington Park, my dad bought me this model, and I have adored it ever since, because this was the coolest thing. This was my dad's car, and it was a race car, and he took me to school in a race car. I mean, it wasn't actually a race car, it was a red Volvo 850 T5, but as far as I'm concerned, it was this exact car that I was being taken to school in. And therein started an obsession with Volvo. Now, when it came time for me to learn to drive, there was no way I was going to be buying a big old Volvo. I'd never get insured on it. And, you know, it was the late 90s, early noughties. It was very much the max power era. So I wanted the small hot hatch, and that is exactly what I got myself. A Vauxhall Corsa B, if you must know. And time went on, I developed an interesting taste in cars. So after the Corsa, I actually ended up with a BMW 5 Series, which was another car I thought I would never get insured. But it was so off the radar of the insurance company, they didn't really know what to make of a 19-year-old boy wanting to insure a BMW 520i. One thing led to another, and a whole part of my life obsessed with BMWs, until I got a little bit older and I was working at the time in a restaurant, and a gentleman working on pot wash, Lee, said to me, my girlfriend's mum is getting rid of a car. It belonged to a late father, and it's going to go to the scrapyard if somebody doesn't buy it. And I was like, I'm always interested in a car. What car is it? And he said it's an old Volvo. And I thought, well, I'm not really in the market for a big old tank of a Volvo. I was at the point in my life where I wanted fast and exciting cars. And he said to me, she said to mention something. It's something called a T5. At which point my ears pricked up, my eyes lit up, and I said, sorry, what? It turned out this car had been a dealership manager's car from new, been bought by this lady's husband to use as his going out, see me out car. Unfortunately for him, that period of time was very, very short. He'd only owned the car for about a year before he passed away, and it sat on their driveway for 2 or 3 years. So I went to look at this car. My friend Lee, the pot washer, he'd had the car all cleaned up for me, ready to go and see it, and it was already up and running. It started, it ran, it worked. And I thought, well, if it's only worth scrap value, it's got to be worth a punt. So I made them an offer at scrap value. They bit my hand off, and with a friend of mine, we towed it around the corner to an MOT station. And lo and behold, with exception to 4 advisories for 4 of the tyres, which were now perished, it passed its MOT. I went and got 4 part warns because I was still barely out of university at this point, and so perpetually skint because of an obsession with cars. And all of a sudden, I had a 2.3 litre turbocharged 5-cylinder car. It was transformative. It was faster than anything else I had ever owned. I would argue faster than the M535 I'd come to own through my days as a student, probably because this one was working, unlike the M535Is. And it opened up a new world. I remembered my obsession with this car. I realised I still had this beautiful model, along with various other bits of Volvo paraphernalia from being a younger boy, and therein started an obsession. I loved that T5. I put nearly 100,000 miles on that nearly scrap car, saved it from the scrapyard in the sky, and I do still have the car. Unfortunately, there came a point where the engine let go. Not insignificant mileage, should have done about 220,000 miles when a piston ring dropped. Sadly, while a friend of mine was borrowing it, which is a bit unfortunate, but we decided to push on, and I put a new engine in the car. It actually came out of a yellow T5R, believe it or not. For those that aren't familiar, they're actually the same engine. There's only a few tweaks in terms of the chassis and a little bit of ECU, suspension setup, etc., etc. Some styling cues on the T5R that makes it different. But I still wanted a T5R. To go back to the story of the T5, this grey T5, N721OFP, if I remember correctly, I did get it back up and running, but very shortly after, the automatic gearbox started to cause me problems. It actually broke down on me while towing a broken down car back from Goodwood with the trailer on the back, so that was a fun day out. And so the car got mothballed. I started the process of collecting the parts to eventually put a manual gearbox in the car because, well, you know, turbo and manual is a perfect combination. And actually, most of these Volvos were actually sold with automatic gearboxes. So that car got mothballed. It is still sort of mothballed. If you follow the channel, you'll know that it was sat outside my workshop for a long, long time going green because I'd sort of got to the end of my tether with it a little bit. There was a few problems I had while doing the manual gearbox install, and just sort of ran out of time with other projects and such. So that has gone off to a specialist, the Volvo Whisperer, a gentleman called Shem at Shemtech, who is finishing the conversion for me. Rightio, security Volvo has moved. Bumper's dropped a bit. Look how green it is on this side where it's been up against the building. Surprisingly, these tyres have stayed up for years on this side, which is handy because you couldn't get to them. Yeah, she's it is actually a nice metallic grey, believe it or not. Yeah, well, it is now. However, in the meantime, I did eventually find a T-5R. So I want to give you a bit of story about the yellow Volvo that sits outside my house. Well, did sit outside my house, is now clean and is sitting in my garage, thanks to Jonny Smith. So, the Volvo 850 T-5R. Cheeky pause in the video to catch my breath and have a drink from my lovely branded Automotive Tales cup. Do like and subscribe and all that. So the Volvo 850 T5R, what is it? What is a T5R? Well, it was sort of kind of a homologation car for Volvo. They wanted to prove to the world that they could make fast cars, and they didn't mind making Larry cars. So the T5R was a limited production run. It was an evolution of the T5 with some really cool styling. It had slightly bigger wheels, low profile tyres. It had a different front splitter. They often came with a little boot spoiler, which was an optional extra on the T5. They came with a slightly different interior package, different suspension, and a slightly different tune on the engine that gave them slightly more power. And this was them sort of testing the waters. So the T5R was only available for 1 year, 1994, but it's a 94 model year, so it sort of bleeds a bit over into 95 as well. And it came in a very small array of colours. You could get it in dark metallic green. You could get it in black. There was a couple sold, I think, in white. There's definitely a white saloon, because I know Shemtech has one. And the majority of them, they came in yellow. A really odd choice for Volvo, a very Larry colour. And it was sort of like a wolf in wolf's clothing. But the reason the yellow cars really stand out is because all of the press fleet were yellow Volvo 850s. And that is exactly why Hot Wheels have made these lovely cool little toys. I have actually got a whole cupboard full of them, because there's numerous different variations of these, the Fast Wagon edition and a few others. They did a British Touring Car edition and a few other touring car model versions of it. And it sort of became an iconic car because it was so mad for the Swedish, a company known for its safety, to bring out this stupidly fast car. And the T5s also got adopted by the British police. So those that live in the UK will know that for a long time, high-speed pursuit cars were all Volvo 850 T5s. They were very poverty spec cars, so they had fabric interiors, no options whatsoever, but they still had that thunking great big 2.3-litre 5-cylinder engine. And they had some slightly bigger brakes as well. They had the 3 or 4 millimeter brakes, which was the same brake as the standard car, but with a slightly different caliper carrier on it, which did eventually come on to something called the 850R. So they proved their point with the T5R. It was a success. People loved this thing. So Volvo went on to produce a more sort of production line version of the car. It had similar stylings, had slightly different wheels, but interestingly had different options on the interior and different colour options. So the yellow was no longer available. You could get them in, the most common colour was bright red, which was the colour my dad's T5 was. They also came in an array of other colours, including some weird, very 90s, like turquoise colours. But they never did it in yellow. And actually, the yellow became the iconic car. It was only available for 1 year. And so when it came time to look for, a new toy car, as happens every once in a while, I decided it had to be a yellow Volvo. But they are very hard to find. Now, I had been stalking one that lives in my local town for years, and I'd put notes on the window a number of times, eventually bumped into the owner coming out of a hardware shop and talked to him about it, and he loved the car to bits, and I said I'd tried to buy it. And he said, yes, I know exactly who you are. I've seen you putting things on my window and know the car is not for sale. That was probably 10 years ago now, and he still drives that car around our local area. He's starting to look a little bit tired, but he certainly loves that thing to bits, and I can see why. Eventually, I did find a car for sale down in Dover, of all places, that looked like the car for me. So I rang the seller up, spoke to him, asked him what he was looking for the car, because there wasn't a price really advertised. It was offers in the region of, and he gave me a price that was somewhat out of my budget. Not wanting to offend the chap, I said, look, okay, that's more than I can offer you. I'm not going to offend you by making a silly offer. And he said, well, what's your budget? So I told him my budget at the time was about, I think it was £3,500. Seems to be a running theme on a lot of my cars. It's about what I paid for the Porsche Boxster. It's about what I paid for the Rolls Royce. And he said, yes, that's a little under what I was looking for. He was looking nearer to £5,000. So we kind of said our thank yous and parted ways. I would say I thought no more about it. I thought extensively about it, and I thought, well, how can I actually raise some more money so I can buy one of these cars? Because really, that was sort of the price point we were looking at for something that wasn't completely wrecked, was about £5,000. And I kind of pondered on this. I spoke to my father. He said, well, you just have to keep saving up. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call from the seller. It was about 2 weeks down the line. And he said, look, I've been messed around. If your offer is genuine and it still stands and you can collect it very shortly, the car is yours at £3,500. And I jumped for joy and said, yes, I will come and collect it as soon as I possibly can. Put the phone down and then realised I had just spent a load of money on my daily driver, a Golf V5 that I had at the time, which is a notorious money pit. and I was actually short of my £3,500. Now, luckily, my dear father had always wanted a yellow T5R. He'd never managed to own one after having his red T5, which went on for years and years and years, and then he upgraded to a slightly newer V70R because they weren't around, they weren't available. And so he was keen to see me have it. So he lent me the difference, which I paid him back in small installments, so that I could have the car I always wanted, the ultimate Volvo 850, the ultimate Volvo in my eyes, the 850 T5R. But that's not where the story ends. So before I even got to collecting the car, it got a little bit strange. So the car was in Dover, which is quite a long way away from where I live, and I need to find a way of getting there and then driving the car back. Fortuitously, a friend of mine had a stag do in Birmingham, and he had friends from university who now lived all around Europe, one of whom lived in Germany. And he had driven over in a prototype Mercedes, because that's where he was working at the time, to come to the stag do. And at the end of the event, we all went for breakfast on the Sunday morning, and I talked about this car I wanted to get. And someone said, well, there's somebody sitting right here who was about to drive to a ferry at Dover. And so a plan was hatched. Well, why not? Why wait until next week and try and book a train ticket? Why not jump in this Mercedes and go off and get the car? So we said, yes, let's do it. I messaged the seller. I said, I am on my way. I'm coming today, if that's okay. And he said, yep, the car is ready to go. It's here waiting for you. So I gathered all my stuff from the hotel room and then realised I had got the money now set aside for the car. I'd taken it out of the bank and it was sitting in my safe at home. I was not at home. And my friend had a ferry to catch and couldn't really afford to drive back up the country just to fetch some money and drive back down and drop me off. So we had a conundrum, which we resolved by everybody on the stag do wandering off to the cash machine and lending me the money and me then paying them back in cash when I saw them over the coming months. So we ended up in a white Mercedes SUV, which was German registered, with a group of lads looking a little bit hungover after a long night in Birmingham, stood around handing cash to me before jumping into said Mercedes and driving off down the motorway. The fact that we weren't arrested in Birmingham is frankly a miracle, because that looked so suspect, it's unbelievable. But I'd managed to overcome all of the obstacles. I had the money, I had the transport, time to go and get the car. The rest of that story is relatively without issue, apart from a known problem with the Volvo 850s, is that if you reset the odometer, I discovered this after collecting my T5R, while the vehicle is driving, you can sometimes break the gear that counts the mileage on the odometer. So I was partway through driving home, I had clocked the mileage when I left and realised the mileage had only gone up by about 2 or 3 miles when I got home, because I'd reset the odometer as I'd left the seller's house and broken the gear that counts the mileage. So the very first thing I had to do when I got the car was rip all of the dashboard apart, pull out the dials and replace this tiny, tiny little gear that is a common problem, so you can buy them all over the place, into the binnacle to allow it to count miles again. But that was it. I had my own yellow T5R, and I can tell you right now, it is an amazing car to drive. And drive it I did. So I drove this thing all over the country. I loved driving around. I drove to work. It was basically my dream car. In fact, you know, you do these away days where people say, tell me a fun fact about you. I was able to stand up one of those and say, I have actually bought my dream car, and it's sitting outside in the car park. Obviously, lots of curious people said, so what is said car? Expecting the answer to be a classic Ferrari or something insane like that. And I said, it's a yellow Volvo estate. At which point, I think they all thought I was absolutely nuts. But those who know, and it is a very cool car. And this one turned out to not be entirely standard. So Shemtech, or Shem, the guy that runs Shemtech, who I mentioned before, is very well known in the Volvo community. Turns out he knew this car very well. He'd already breathed on it a little bit. It wasn't entirely stock. While it looked stock under the bonnet, it had a slightly different hybrid turbo, some slightly bigger injectors, and a bit of a map on the ECU. And my word, did that show. It was a lot quicker than my 850 T5. One of the best things we probably did, but we attended the very first record attempt for Volvo 600 that happened at Bruntingthorpe, not all that far away from where we are here. And yeah, it was not quite the star of the show because it wasn't the only one there, but one of a very small number of Volvo 850 T-5Rs, and an even smaller number in the all-important Gull, as it's known, which is Swedish for yellow. Although if you're part of the Volvo forums, there's a less polite name for the particular colour of yellow, but I'll leave you to go and figure that out for yourself. So after the Volvo 600, what else did we do with the car? Well, we took it along to an amazing event called the Yellow Car Convoy. So there's a bit of history required here. It's not all Volvo related, but bear with me. A few years ago, there's a small town in the Cotswolds, the name of which evades me, Bybury. There's a small town in the Cotswolds called Bybury, which used to be featured on the inside cover of your passport. Sorry, I stopped the camera for a second to go and see if I could find an old passport. Sadly, I haven't got one old enough that has Bybury inside the cover. But it's the quintessential British town, or quintessential British village, I should say. It's a lovely water scene, a waterside scene with some little cottages going off up the hill. And there was a gentleman that lived there who was retired. He was an retired dentist, I think. And he had a Vauxhall Corsa that they used to park outside of his house, and it was bright yellow. Unfortunately, on more than one occasion, this car got vandalised, eventually somebody putting a sticker on saying, "How dare you park this in such a scenic location?" And it transpired that tourists were getting very annoyed that this lovely, idyllic view they were trying to take a photo of was spoilt by somebody who actually owned the house they were taking a photo of, having their own car parked outside of it. Now, this enraged a fellow yellow Volvo car owner. That's a mouthful, don't say that after a few drinks. And he decided that this was not okay. So he put together a bit of an event to celebrate all things yellow car, and that evolved into a convoy of hundreds and hundreds of yellow cars driving through the centre of Bybury and doing a bit of a tour of the Cotswolds in the process. And I was invited along to bring my yellow Volvo 850 T5, the only one that attended on the day, as it happens, alongside all sorts of interesting things. And I will put a link in the one of the little cards up here on the screen. There are some videos still floating around. It was a bit sort of early days of YouTube. It was certainly pre-Automotive Tales, but there are some videos floating around from the Yellow Car Convoy, and you will see my yellow Volvo M625 TKX right there in the middle of the pack. So we've had lots of fun events with the Volvo 850. This culminated in probably the most important day of my entire life, the day I said I do. I actually used my yellow Volvo as my wedding car, and I'll insert some photos here because it really was the star of the show. It stood out like a sore thumb, and it is a little bit like me. It's a little bit eccentric, and well, as I'm getting older, it's also quite a large car, as I'm starting to become quite a large gentleman. So yes, the car is much loved, but unfortunately, things didn't take a great turn for the Volvo. In about 2019, I was struggling a bit with storage, so I took the car up to Yorkshire, where my father lived, to store it, first of all, in his garage. Eventually, it got moved out of the way for one of his cars, which you'll probably know a bit more about if you follow the channel. So eventually, it got turfed out into the yard, still in secure storage, but outside, and that was only supposed to be a temporary measure. Unfortunately, then COVID happened, and because my dad needed quite specialist care, there was a very limited number of people that could see him, and that didn't include me, mainly the people that were caring for him. And because I was such a long way away, it was a bit difficult to justify driving all that way when it was really technically illegal to do anything other than walk around your village twice a day. So the car ended up left outside for a long period of time. When I was eventually able to go and see my family, and certainly my father, sadly, the Volvo wasn't top of my priority list. It was seeing my then very ill father. One thing led to another, and unfortunately, we did lose my father back in 2021. And so we had to clear the house, and the Volvo had to come home. So you will pick up the thread on the channel at that point. That's when we put the car on a low loader. We brought it back here to, well, back to HQ 1.0. We then had to move it again here to HQ 2.0, where it has sat since. And that is where you pick up the story on the Late Break Show channel, when Jonny Smith came to see the car, sadly looking very green as a combination of its years outside. And yeah, he had a quick look round it, he cleaned the car up, and it looks fabulous. I was expecting quite a substantial restoration was going to be in order after the time laid up. He thinks just a little bit of a refresh, so hopefully we can get a few jobs done on the car, which will be documented on this channel. and get the car up and running. One of the things we did notice on the day, I don't know if it was captured on the film, you'd have probably seen there was some smoke coming out of the bonnet. We had an issue not long before it went away with a power steering pump failing and pouring oil on all the ancillaries that sit beneath the power steering pump. And that includes the alternator. So we did manage to get the car started, but we did notice it wasn't charging. So one of the first jobs we're going to have to do is pull a load of the ancillaries out to get to the alternator and replace the alternator, which is not an easy job. Something I have done in the past, though, so I have got a special tool waiting for me in the garage that a friend of mine, Andy, made for me, because access to all the bits and pieces like the belt tensioner on the side of the engine is incredibly tight because you've got 5 cylinders running across the car between your chassis rails. So that'll be the next job on the Volvo. But yeah, I thought I would give you a bit of the background on how I ended up owning this amazing yellow Volvo and how it's ended up in the very sad state it's currently in. But rest assured, this car is loved. I adore this car. I have a history with Volvos and 850s. I have probably 2 or 3 complete 850s worth of parts floating around my house. So it shall be put back on the road and it shall be restored. So next thing I want to do is I'm going to dig into the file of history and see if there's any interesting tidbits to add to this, the fabric of the story of the Volvo 850, because I have, excuse me, a large biscuit, I have a very large box file for the Volvo 850 T5, which is of course yellow, but it had to be yellow. So right, let's dig into the history. Yellow Volvo, it's getting cleaned. How weird does it look? Like you almost can't see it with the snow foam on. So first things first, I have the owner's manual for the car, which is this lovely sort of like flocking. It's sort of slightly fluffy, velvety type material. So it's got lots of information in here. It tells me the date of first registration. So this was a December 94 car. So I was just over 10 years old when this car was first registered. And it was registered to Mr. David Sutton in Wendover, of all places, believe it or not. And there's lots of conf in here about Volvo and the different engines. What have we got here? I don't know what that is. Your new vehicle extended warranty. Okay, here, this is interesting. This looks like a copy of one of the original brochures. So you'll see all the brochures have a yellow T-5R, both saloon and estate. All of the press cars were yellow cars. But yeah, what a cool thing. We've also got, let's have a look, like the user manual for the car, which is looking a bit tatty these days, but it does still exist. So here we are. We've got the user manual for the Volvo 850. Ironically, because of the limited colour palette they used for it, it actually has sort of an orangey yellow Volvo on the back, which is a bit random. Still the days where it told you lots of things like how to check the oil, what oil you should be using, what tyre pressures you should be using, how to check spark plugs, what light bulbs to use, how to use all the different radios, which is a bit of a thing of the past. This is all now on a touch screen and is frankly irritating. So what else have we got in here? I've got a little touch-up pen in the proper gull yellow. There's a thing of the past. You don't see those very often anymore. An awful lot of receipts. Every time I've been to anything where there's a Volvo event, and this was things from Carfest, I like to pick up little natty Volvo things because I'm a bit weird like that. But one of the coolest things in here, in the video with Jonny Smith, I don't know whether it'll make the edit, but we talked about the towing accessory that is fitted to my Volvo 850 T5R. Something that you or I would actually genuinely call a strut brace. But I kid you not, it is a Volvo part. And to prove it, in case I had ever had to prove it to the insurance company, I kept the bag in which it came, this massive, great big piece of plastic, Volvo branded with the part number. Genuine spare parts, spring strut. That's what it says. It's from Chesterfield Volvo. So that is genuinely a Volvo towing accessory part that came from the factory, or could be fitted aftermarket. So yeah, they sort of knew what they were doing here. It's like the old Batmobiles that didn't have the spoilers on, but they all came in the boot and you could choose to fit it yourself. So other paperwork wise, well, there isn't a lot of interest other than a massive stack of receipts going back right into the late 90s. Nothing really major to speak of, lots of kind of servicing and repairs and brakes and a few bits of fault finding. But what I did find that was quite cool was what I think is its first MOT. So as a new car, it won't need an MOT for the first couple of years, but in December 1997, it has these old school, people might not remember these old school MOT certificates, which is a written certificate. So that's 97 to 98, I have 98 to 99, and I have 2000 to 2001. So I have the first, not 3 years, but the first 3 MOT certificates that the car ever had. Everything after that is a paper certificate, of which there are stacks. So it has got a little bit of a cool bit of history there. And I also found, I'd forgotten this was in here, there is, I think, one in the boot of the car, because I've acquired a couple of these over the years, but the original toolkit, this will be a pristine one, yes it will. Original toolkit complete with, wait for it, little white cotton gloves. Gosh, that is clean. So yes, original Volvo tools. There's the handle for the screwdriver. So you've got various inserts for the screwdriver that live in here, so that you can work on the car should you need to. How lovely. Right, well, that's about all there is in here, apart from spare key and some lanyards from the original Volvo 600 attempt and various other paraphernalia that goes with. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this little journey looking at the history of the car, my story around my involvement with Volvo and Volvo 850, and why they mean so much to me, why this car is so dear to me, but also why it's ended up in what was quite a sorry state, to be honest. And hopefully this is the start of things to come. We'll get the car back up and running. Well, we have got it started, but get it up and running properly with a new alternator, which is actually sitting on the floor down here. I ordered it after we did the startup video with Jonny when I realised it needed one. So hopefully that will be all it needs. Probably a fuel flush, although it started very nicely. It runs very smoothly, but then it is a Volvo. I expect nothing less. But it will probably benefit from a fuel system clean out, and definitely see where the oil starts to leak after it's been ice blasted. Yeah, give it a good clean. There's a few little spots of rust that might need addressing. Otherwise, it looks all right. Definitely wheels and tyres. My word. I mean, I don't know if you saw in the video, but it got a slow puncture. There's one I used to keep pumping up and it kept going flat. Which is on the rear right, I think. It was very flat, even on the lift, and it's only been there a couple of weeks since Jonny's been here to film. So yeah, not ideal. But yeah, that's it. That's my story of my Volvo 850 T-5R and why this appears in the video and why this is so precious to me. I will insert some videos of my my cabinet of Volvo dreams over here that's got all my other collection of model Volvos in. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little journey. And yeah, do like and subscribe if you want to see more content in the Volvo. At some point, that grey 850 T5 will be coming back into the fleet. I'd like to press that into fairly regular use. At the moment, I'm pressing a Rolls-Royce into regular use, which isn't really ideal. And then when the yellow car goes back on the road, I'd like to push that into regular use as well. And I guess to close out, I should probably explain what this is all about. So I wore this in the video with Jonny because I found it in the glove box. I'd forgotten about this. So a friend of mine, Janet, who lives all the way down in Australia, knitted this for me because she knew I was obsessed with Swedish cars, specifically Volvos. And I thought that best stay with the T5R and completely forgot it was there. So this was a lovely little find when we started playing around with the car and looking at what was inside it. So I thought I'd wear it for this video. So thank you once again, Janet, for my delightful Swedish beanie hat. You'll see in other videos I like wearing beanie hats because, well, it stops my hair going mental, and they're also nice and warm. Apparently my head gets cold. My brain clearly is rattling around in lots of dead space in here, which is why it gets cold. Right, that's all for this episode of Automotive Tales. I look forward to seeing you again on the channel soon, and hopefully we'll have some more Volvo content in and amongst other things for you. All right, bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I think we should have an action camera.